Welcome to Week 3, Part 2, Canadian Nursing Organizations. I'm not going to repeat what you've had in other courses, and so I won't be going into detail about Canadian nursing organizations. However, I know from experience that students often think they understand about these organizations, but when it comes to telling someone else about each organization, then many students actually get confused. It is important for you to consider what you really know about the major nursing organizations that will affect you when you become an RN in Ontario. You will also need to be able to differentiate amongst different types of organizations, as well as to know what organizations are for all Canadian nurses versus only nurses in Ontario. So let's look at some of them. So the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing, or CASN, is a voluntary organization that is the national voice for nursing education, research, and scholarship, and the representative of all universities and colleges that offer part or all of an undergraduate or graduate degree in nursing. CASN establishes and promotes national standards of excellence for nursing education. It is also the official accrediting agency for university nursing programs in Canada, and some universities need accreditation so that graduates of their nursing programs are eligible to write the national exam. Up until recently, nursing programs in Ontario needed to be accredited by CASN. But as I said before, the College of Nurses of Ontario has now stated their own mandatory approval process, and renewing accreditation is now optional. A little bit about CASN, and the National Nursing Education Framework. So this framework specifies baccalaureate level expectation for nursing education, regardless of the type of path taken to earn the degree. For example, second entry compressed, collaborative, internationally educated nurses. The purpose of the framework is to provide schools of nursing with national guidelines that integrate professional and academic expectations for institutions of higher learning. So the framework offers schools direction in developing, reviewing, evaluating, or modifying nursing programs and curricula. Therefore, this framework shows what all of you are expected to learn as nursing students across 6 domains. You should see this from this document that even some of the courses you might have thought you didn't need as an RN actually are necessary to meet the national standards. And so this is the document I'm talking about right here, the National Nursing Education Framework. So CNA, or the Canadian Nurses Association. So CNA has been the national professional voice of registered nurses, so RNs, including nurse practitioners, in Canada for many years, but fairly recently, licensed or registered practical nurses and registered psychiatric nurses, those are RPNs in Western Canada only, were able to join. Ontario's RNs may voluntarily choose to be members of CNA and thus be affiliated with the International Council of Nurses. The CNA has a national as well as a global professional and political profile and practice. It also sets out a Canadian framework for ethics in the nursing profession, whether RN, MP, or RPN or LPN. In 2015, CNA was concerned about the way in which healthcare settings were using RNs and RPNs, so they wrote a document to ensure that policymakers, decision makers, and employers in Canada could clearly understand RN competencies and contributions, as well as know when RN care is the most appropriate level of care, rather than using RPNs, for example. In addition, the framework is meant to be a resource for RNs who are working with others to develop a healthcare system that is more responsive to the needs and priorities of Canadians. The Code of Ethics and the RN Practice Framework will affect your everyday practice as an RN, and you should make sure that you are very familiar with these documents. A little bit about the Canadian Nurses Student Association, or CNSA. So CNSA for over 30 years has represented the interests of nursing students to federal, provincial, and international government bodies and to other nursing and healthcare organizations. As a student in the York University School of Nursing, you have been and still are a member of CNSA. Talk with NSA to learn more. Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. So RNAO is the professional organization or association representing RNs, NPs, and nursing students in Ontario. Membership is voluntary. A few years ago, the RNAO leadership decided to remove the RNA organization from CNA. You were to read the backgrounder in the CNA 2016 reading for today. In most of Canada, a nurse is automatically a member of the National Professional Organization, CNA, which is linked to the Global Nursing Professional Organization, the International Council of Nurses. But in Ontario, we now have to purchase an individual membership for CNA. I used to get my protection insurance through RNAO, but now I buy it as an individual through the Canadian Nurse Protective Society, an organization founded by nurses for nurses to enable nurses to effectively manage their professional legal rights and to be appropriately assisted when in professional legal jeopardy. RNAO has developed multiple best practice guidelines, many of which are used in various parts of the world. They are free to access, and you should find them helpful at different times in your career. When you graduate, you should also check to see if the new graduate program is still in place. It was definitely being funded for this fall, but it is not guaranteed to be available each year. You may qualify for free membership within 12 months after your graduation from York. The free membership provides professional liability protection that satisfies the CNO requirement, a gold-colored RN pin, a subscription to RNAO's journal, up to 40% savings on registration for conferences and workshops, group rate savings on home and auto insurance, and opportunities to get involved and network with nurses from across Canada. ONA, the Ontario Nurses Association, is the union. So ONA is the union representing approximately 65,000 RN and health professionals, as well as approximately 18,000 nursing student affiliates across Ontario. RN members are frontline nurses working in hospitals, public health, community health centers, home care, family health teams, long-term care, and private clinics. Membership is mandatory in workplaces where the ONA collective agreement is in force. ONA negotiates wages, benefits, and working conditions on behalf of its members. As a nursing student in an accredited nursing program, you are able to access ONA's free workshops. ONA also has up to 10 scholarships a year for nursing students, each worth $1,000. In addition, one nursing student in Ontario could win a $1,000 scholarship through the Canadian Federation of Nursing Unions. You don't have much time left in your program, but you might want to consider how to become active with ONA. Lastly, but definitely not least, is the College of Nurses of Ontario. As I talked about in the previous presentation about nursing-related legislation, CNO is the regulatory body for all nurses registered in Ontario. So in many ways, you will have two bosses when you become an RN in Ontario, your employer and CNO. Therefore, you need to pay attention to the policies, procedures, etc. within your employment setting, as well as to the standards, guidelines, and so on that CNO sets out for RNs. Failing to meet the requirements of either one could lead you into a lot of trouble, from being reprimanded to losing your job, your registration, and perhaps even your freedom if you break the law. CNO has many documents that are all available online and that you as an RN are meant to understand and follow. I would not expect you to try to memorize everything, but you do at least have to know where to find your resources, and you need to have a solid understanding of the documents you were to read for this week's class. They are the professional standards, the E to PC that came into effect at the beginning of September, so the entry to practice competencies, the code of conduct, and the ethics practice standard. Make sure you are really familiar with all of these documents now. You can build on them using other resources as you prepare for graduation and then begin your career as an RN. I find it a good idea to check for updates on a regular basis. I recommend you start this practice immediately if you're not already doing it, so you are always using the most current standard, practice guidelines, etc. Sometimes changes are very minor, but other times they are quite serious, and you will always be held accountable to meeting the most current requirements. Being unaware of a change in the requirements would not be a sufficient reason if you failed to uphold a requirement. So we have our Zoom meeting on September the 29th from 3 to 4 p.m. And we will not necessarily review everything that I've discussed in both these presentations or lectures, but we're going to do a little bit more of a discussion on what was presented. See you then.